She ran her thumb along the seam above the kitchen window and stopped. There, ghosted into the drywall tape, was a faint gray line, a shape she hadn't put there and couldn't explain. 14 months. That's all it took for her brand new Barndominium to start telling her secrets. I'll call her Marisol because she asked me to. 18 months earlier, she'd stood in that same kitchen with paint samples in one hand and her husband's arm in the other, sunlight pouring through a bank of west-facing windows onto floors that still smelled faintly of curing epoxy. Everything gleamed. Everything smelled new. Nobody warns you, in that moment, that new is a temporary condition, that a building this fresh is really just a photograph of itself, taken a fraction of a second before the aging starts. If you're building one of these homes, or living in one already, I want you to understand something most videos won't tell you. Metal buildings don't fail all at once. They confess slowly. A line here, a smell there, a pop in the middle of the night that makes you sit up in bed. And by the time most people notice the pattern has already been writing itself into their walls for years. I've spent the last few seasons walking through finished barndominiums with the people who built them, some proud, some quietly worried, and I started keeping notes. Not on style, not on paint colors or shiplap, or any of that. On where? On the specific, repeatable ways these buildings age, and what that aging says about the choices made long before move-in day. 10 patterns kept showing up. Once you see them, you can't unsee them. And one of them, I promise, connects directly back to that gray line above the kitchen window. Let's start with the quiet one, the condensation shadow. In a lot of these homes, steel purlins run behind the ceiling, and wherever a screw or a bracket touches that steel without a thermal break, the metal gets just cold enough, just often enough, that moisture in the air finds it first. Dust rides along on that moisture. Over 2-3 years, a faint outline appears, a ghost of every fastener in the roof, mapped out in gray dust for anyone who looks up. It's not damage exactly. It's evidence. A quiet record of every place heat was allowed to leak. Therefore, the second pattern follows almost naturally, the oxidation halo. Wherever moisture collects, metal remembers. Around bolt heads and trim screws, a faint orange bloom starts creeping outward from beneath the paint, sometimes within a single humid summer. It looks small. It looks cosmetic. But it's the surface telling you what's happening underneath, in places you can't see. But not every pattern comes from moisture. Some come from movement. Steel expands and contracts more than wood ever will. So in homes where wood trim meets a steel frame directly, you'll start to notice something strange around year 2. Gaps that open in summer and quietly close again by winter. The wood is trying to breathe. The steel isn't. And the seam between them becomes a kind of slow argument that never actually ends. Marisol's husband found this one first. The pantry door that latched perfectly every March and stuck every July, like the house itself was breathing in and out on a season-long rhythm nobody had warned them about. He blamed the door. He blamed the humidity. It took a contractor almost a year to explain that he wasn't wrong to be confused, because the house really was moving, just slowly enough that no single day ever proved it. That argument shows up again, louder, and drywall seems anywhere near structural steel. Homeowners describe it as popping, a soft, sharp sound in the evening when the temperature drops. It's not settling in the traditional sense. It's the frame flexing at a scale too small to see, but just large enough to hear. The tape cracks, the mud shifts, and a hairline seam becomes a permanent feature of the room. Here's where I want to pause for a second, because I think it matters. A lot of the people who shared their homes with me for this kind of research get torn apart in comment sections. Not for the information, but for how a video looks. This is AI garbage. Fake images, don't trust it. I understand the instinct. Genuinely. But I'd ask you to sit with something. Somewhere behind every video like this is a person who spent hours pulling apart real patterns, cross-referencing real failures, trying to hand you something useful before it costs you money. Judging that effort purely on a thumbnail is its own kind of wear pattern, the kind that quietly erodes good research out of a space that badly needs it, until only the shiny, empty stuff is left standing. Okay, back to the walls. Pattern 5 lives on the floor. Epoxy and polyurethane coatings, especially in sun-heavy rooms, start to amber over time. A slow yellowing that most people mistake for dirt until they scrub it and realize the color itself has shifted. UV doesn't just fade fabric. It changes the chemistry of the finish you're standing on, one afternoon at a time. Marisol's kitchen floor, the one soaking in West light every single afternoon, was already 3 shades warmer than the sample she'd once held in a showroom. She didn't notice until the evening she pressed that old paint chip against the tile and realized, with a small jolt, that she wasn't looking at the same color anymore. Pattern 6 hides behind the walls entirely, and it's the one that worries me most. Vapor barriers in metal buildings take on a kind of fatigue over the years. Tiny failures at seams and penetrations that let moisture creep in where it was never supposed to go. You won't see this one. You'll smell it. A faint mustiness that shows up before any visible damage does. Usually dismissed as just an old house smell, in a house that isn't old at all. But therefore comes pattern 7, its cousin, window haze. Spray foam insulation, even years after installation, can slowly off-gas in warm weather, leaving a faint film on interior glass that no amount of Windex fully removes. People blame the windows. It's rarely the windows. Pattern 8 is almost invisible until you know to look for it. Static dust lines running along baseboards near exterior steel walls, caused by tiny electrical charges building where 2 very different materials meet. It's harmless, but it's a map, again, of exactly where your insulation is doing its job and exactly where it isn't. Marisol noticed hers along the mudroom wall first, thin as pencil lines, and assumed, reasonably, that it was just dust from foot traffic. It wasn't just dust. It was static, quietly pulling airborne particles toward the exact seams where 2 very different materials were locked in a slow, invisible disagreement, one electron at a time. Pattern 9 is the one that scares new owners the most, and it's usually the least dangerous. Hairline cracks radiating from the corners of large openings, like garage doors or big glass walls, as a concrete slab finishes curing over its first 18 to 24 months. It looks alarming. It's mostly cosmetic, but it's also completely predictable if anyone had told you to expect it. Marisol called an engineer the week those cracks appeared by her garage door, certain the whole slab was failing beneath her. He laughed, not unkindly, and told her he could set his watch by calls exactly like hers. Every slab does this, he said. Nobody tells you beforehand, so it feels like a catastrophe instead of a Tuesday. And that brings us to pattern 10, the one that started this whole story. That gray line above the kitchen window? It wasn't a flaw. It was a thermal bridge, a single uninsulated bracket doing exactly what uninsulated brackets do, quietly, for over a year, until it finally became visible enough to touch. The head fake here is this. It wasn't a mistake in the build. It was a decision, made months earlier, in a materials meeting nobody thought twice about. Insulation grade, fastener type, a few dollars saved per linear foot. The wall didn't fail. It simply told the truth about a choice that was made before the drywall ever went up. That's the thing about all 10 of these patterns. None of them are really about the metal, or the moisture, or the wood. They're about decisions, the quiet, unglamorous ones made in the planning stage, long before anyone's standing in a finished kitchen running their thumb along a seam. Insulation grade, fastener type, vapor barrier quality. The kind of choices that don't photograph well, that nobody puts in a reveal video, but that determine whether your home ages gracefully or starts confessing its shortcuts within the first 2 years. So if you're planning one of these builds, here's the only thing I'd ask you to take from this. Don't just choose what looks good on move-in day. Choose what you're willing to live inside of in year 5, year 10, year 20, because the walls are already keeping score, whether you're watching or not. Marisol keeps a small note taped inside that pantry now, right next to the door that still swells every July. It just says, ask why before you choose what. Not because it's poetic. She'd be the first to tell you it isn't, but because it's the one habit that's actually saved her money since move-in day. The goal was never to scare anyone out of building one of these homes. It was to make sure that whichever one you build, it ages like something you chose on purpose and not like something that simply happened to you while you were busy admiring the countertops. And somewhere, right now, in a barndominium very much like the one you might be planning, there's a gray line just starting to form above someone's window. They haven't noticed it yet, but they will.